not the only job you had. We already talked about all the things that you did as Secretary of Defense, but procurement is a big deal. You probably know the ins and outs of what's happening with this merger, whether it's good. And I'll bet you could do a pros and cons of these two companies getting together, couldn't you?
And if I were still the top weapons buyer, I would. And the policy the president's referencing is right. We need to have leverage as the government. The taxpayer and the warfighter need to have leverage in the business deal with the industry that serves us. We don't make anything in the Pentagon. We buy everything in private industry, so we need a healthy defense industry.
Nobody wants
At the same time, we need a good deal with them. And I'm afraid I cannot, because I wrote the policy and I formerly occupied the position, talk specifically about the UTC and Raytheon deal. Let me just say this, though, that I think that Acting Secretary Shanahan and his staff will do a kind of before and after comparison. What is the government's situation with respect to the strength of the industry and deal making with them before and after? And it has the right to deny if it feels that the net leverage has been lost, but there are ways that net leverage can be gained as well, and they'll need to look at all.
What does the rule say that you wrote?
It said that we were going to look very carefully and with a presumption against large, very similar companies continuing to consolidate in the defense sector.
With presumption against.
Yes,
that's
we're thinking mostly about the big platform makers at that time, and this is a very different situation.
But if you want companies to take advantage of synergies and cost savings and rationalizing operations and driving down costs, if you can trust them not to if they get some type of increased monopolistic, power, you wouldn't want that. But you would hope that they would be able to rationalize things and buy them and make them cheaper.
We need a successful, financially successful, technologically vibrant defense sector. So you got to weigh that in the pan as well. You know, when you don't have head-to-head competition, which is many times. And by the way, you know, Apple, when it buys the components for its phones, some of those components are only made by one supplier. Okay. So everybody at some point runs into this one supplier did. Now, what do you do in that case? It gets down to the contract you negotiate. You make them compete with themselves. So, for example, to take the Joint Strike Fighter, the contract we wrote, and this was controversial at the time because they didn't want to do it, said for the early airplanes, here's the price. If you underrun, you get to save 50 cents on every dollar. If you overrun, you have to pay 50 cents on every dollar. And if you overrun too much, you got to pay the whole thing. So we wrote that because we didn't have another supplier for the Joint Strike Fighter. That was the only one. So then they're competing with themselves for profit. So you're not completely helpless, even in a situation where you face them. Which sometimes we do in the defense sector, but God, everybody does also.
To what extent has China's innovation in the defense sector caught up with the U.S. over the last?
I don't think it's caught up with us, but I worry about that. And one of my big priorities, and I believe this is continuing in the department today, it certainly should, and I think it is, was to sort of swing us from counterterrorism and counterinsurgency. And we talked about that. Joe was saying just the importance of that. I was all in for Afghanistan and Iraq. You can't be otherwise when you have troops there. On the other hand, does that take your eye a little bit off the big guys, Russia and China, and the high-end conflict? It did. We have to admit that. And the decade before that, in the 1990s, we all hoped things were going to turn out better. So for a long time, we kind of took our eye off that ball. Now we need to get back to that ball and be competitive with China, not just in the trade sense, which we were discussing with Secretary Ross, but in the overall geostrategic and military sense as well. That means continuing to be the firstest with the mostest with technology. And there's another point for the health of the defense industry is linking it to the tech industry. You know, when I started out, and I say this in the book, as a physicist, getting into defense, everything that was done that mattered in technology, the internet, all that came out of defense. It all was American and it came out of defense. Those days are gone. We still do a lot of important stuff. We do more R&D than Apple and Microsoft and Google combined. Some people don't know that. in the Defense Department. So we're a big dog still, but we're not the only dog anymore. And what that means is that the links between us and the tech sector is very important to the health of our industry and our ability to compete with China. And I did a lot to build those links, try to get past the Snowden business.
So do you get frustrated when you hear leaders in Silicon Valley going to China, trying to work with China very closely, almost trying to pretend that they're global citizens and not U.S. companies?
That does bother me, because I think to myself, look, if I were reasoning with those folks, I'd say, you're an American company, you're protected by American law. That's what guarantees your business environment and your profits. You come to work, you drive on American roads. Where do you think they come from? You hire employees who can read and write. Where do you think that comes from? It's an education system. And so you can't escape being an American citizen. You can be a global business, but you also have to recognize that with the privileges you get of being an American company come some responsibilities to the country as well.
Very quick, Raytheon, United, do you think it goes ahead?
I really can't, I mustn't comment on that, because it was my policy and my responsibility. It's a particular regulatory matter.
That's right.
Let them work it through according to the principles that I described.
If it looks likely, raise your right eye.
I can't.
I can't do that either, actually. I'd be totally confused. I still wouldn't know. Okay.